You promised yourself you wouldn't do it. Maybe you said it out loud once, to a friend or a therapist, or just to yourself in a quiet moment where you could finally see clearly what your childhood had looked like. You promised you wouldn't be cold the way they were cold, or explosive the way they were explosive, or absent in the particular way they were absent. You had a name for the thing you didn't want to become. And then, one day, in the middle of a conflict or a silence or a moment of stress you didn't see coming, you heard something come out of your mouth in a tone you recognized, a reaction that felt familiar in the worst possible way, a pattern you had identified and named and promised yourself you had left behind. This is one of the most disorienting experiences an adult can have, not because the pattern surprised you, exactly, but because you had done everything you thought you were supposed to do. You saw it. You named it. You decided not to repeat it. And it happened anyway. The reason it happened has nothing to do with weakness or lack of self-awareness or insufficient effort. It has to do with where patterns actually live in the body and why seeing a pattern clearly is necessary, but almost never sufficient to break it. Patterns handed down through families don't primarily travel through genetics, though genetics plays a small role. They travel through behavior, through the 10,000 small interactions between a parent and a child that teach the child. Before language exists to process any of it, what relationships look and feel like, what a conflict sounds like, what love looks like when it's afraid, what safety feels like when it's never quite reliable. These are not lessons taught intentionally. They are absorbed. Psychiatrist Daniel Siegel, whose work in interpersonal neurobiology has reshaped how we understand the relationship between early experience and brain development, has written extensively about how the developing brain of a child is shaped by repeated relational experiences. The brain, in its early years, is not a fixed structure. It is actively being built by the quality of the relationships surrounding it. The way a caregiver responds to distress, manages conflict, expresses emotion, or withdraws from connection, quite literally shapes the neural pathways the child will later use to navigate their own emotional life. The child does not decide to adopt these pathways. They are installed before the child has any way of choosing differently. This is why the promise you made to yourself, however sincere, was made at the level of the conscious mind. But the pattern you were trying to escape was installed at the level of the nervous system, years before conscious thought was available to you. The promise and the pattern are not competing on equal footing. Psychiatrist Murray Bowen, who spent decades studying how emotional patterns move through families across generations, called this the multigenerational transmission process. His observation, developed through years of clinical work at the National Institute of Mental Health, was that families are not just collections of individuals. They are emotional systems. And within those systems, patterns of managing anxiety, relating to others, and handling conflict are transmitted from generation to generation, not through conscious instruction, but through the lived emotional texture of daily family life. A child absorbs not just what their parents do, but how their parents feel, how they manage feeling, and crucially, what they do when feeling becomes difficult. Bowen also identified something he called differentiation of self, a term for the degree to which a person can maintain their own sense of identity and emotional stability while remaining in close relationship with family members. Low differentiation, in Bowen's framework, means that a person's emotional state is heavily governed by the emotional climate around them. They react rather than respond. They are pulled along by the family system's emotional current without always knowing it. And the patterns of the family system, having shaped their nervous system from the start, feel not like external rules to be followed, but like the natural shape of how things are. This is the part that is so hard to see from the inside. When you are repeating a parent's pattern, it rarely feels like repeating anything. It feels like the appropriate response to the situation at hand. The tone of voice that sounds like your father's voice is experienced from the inside as simply the correct way to respond to this level of frustration. The withdrawal that echoes your mother's withdrawal feels from the inside, like a reasonable response to feeling overwhelmed. The pattern doesn't arrive wearing a label that identifies it as inherited. It arrives wearing the face of the present moment. There's also a specific version of this worth naming because it is particularly confusing. You can understand your parents' behavior completely. You can have compassion for where it came from. You can see the pain or fear that drove it. You can have a fully formed and nuanced account of why they were the way they were, and still repeat the pattern. Understanding does not immunize you against repetition. In some cases, the understanding can even become a way of staying close to the pattern without disrupting it, a way of explaining it rather than changing it. Insight without embodied change is very common, and it is not a failure of intelligence or effort. It is simply an accurate description of how deep the installation goes. Carl Jung wrote that whatever is not made conscious becomes fate. He meant that the material we haven't examined, the patterns we haven't brought into awareness and genuinely worked through, will continue to express itself as behavior that feels chosen and inevitable at the same time. This is especially true of family patterns, because they were installed so early, so thoroughly, and in the absence of any capacity for reflection on the child's part. They precede you. They were shaping your responses before you had a self capable of noticing that your responses were being shaped. This is why seeing the pattern is important, but not enough. Many people spend years in therapy developing an extremely accurate and detailed understanding of their family's emotional system and their own repeating patterns, and still find themselves doing the same thing under stress. The understanding is real and it matters, but the nervous system requires more than understanding. It requires new experience, new repeated experience specifically, the kind that installs a different set of defaults in the same way the original patterns were installed, through the body, through repetition, through time. What this looks like in practice is less about catching the pattern after it happens, though that matters too, and more about the moment just before. The moment when the stress response begins, when something in the situation triggers the nervous system into its old, familiar configuration. The pause, however brief, between the trigger and the response is where the possibility of something different lives. Not a pause of analysis, not stopping to reflect on which parent you are currently channeling, just a pause long enough for a different option to exist at all. There is also something worth saying about what happens when you do catch the pattern happening in real time. The instinct for most people is immediate self-criticism, a kind of internal audit that sounds like, I'm doing it again. I'm exactly like them. I haven't changed at all. That response is understandable, but it is also counterproductive because shame tends to collapse the very pause you need to do something different. Shame accelerates the old pattern rather than interrupting it. The more useful response to catching the pattern midstream is something closer to neutral recognition. This is happening. That noticing, without the added weight of self-condemnation, keeps the observing part of you present. And the observing part of you is the only part capable of choosing something different. The pattern is not you. It was never you. It was an adaptation your developing nervous system made to a particular emotional environment, long before you were capable of evaluating that environment or choosing how to respond to it. You absorbed it the way you absorbed the language spoken in your house, the food that felt like home, the quality of silence that preceded conflict, automatically, completely, without consent. And the work of breaking it is not the work of deciding to be different. Decisions happen at the level of thought. The work is slower and more physical than that. It is the accumulated experience of pausing, of choosing differently when the nervous system pulls toward the old response, of building, one interaction at a time, a new set of defaults that gradually come to feel as natural as the ones they replaced. You are not your parents' patterns. You are the person who can finally see them. That is not a small thing. And it is not nothing. It is, in fact, where the whole process starts.